TorahCafe.com.
We have 4 distinguished panelists from different parts of the world who began their Shlichus, their mission, in different years and in different places. And we're going to invite them to please join us. We're going to start with the most senior of the group, Rabbi Shmuel, who went to England in 1965. And Rabbi Shmuel Kaminetzki, who went to the Ukraine, the Dnepropetrovsk in 1990. Rabbi Zalman Mendelsohn, who went to, of all places, Jackson Hole, Wyoming in 2007. And Rabbi Bentzion Butman, who went to Phnom Penh in Cambodia in 2009. My name is David Eliezeri. I've been a shliach for many moons, almost 38 years, first in Florida, now in California. And we're going to talk today about what Chabad was like then, what was Chabad like now, and how things have changed, and the challenges, the unique challenges they each faced in different times, and in different locales and in different geography. And I think, with all sense of due respect, we should begin with Rabbi Lou, who's one of the senior shluchim now in the world. He's been since 1965 in England, and to tell us for a moment, what was the attitude when you arrived in London? Was a big Jewish community, but I don't necessarily feel it had the same warmth to traditional Judaism today. There was recently a demographic survey that the religious community is one of the most growing and like 30 or 40% of children in England, I think it was, are religious today. Things must have been a lot different when you arrived in 1965.
40% of the children of England did not have any Jewish education. That means not even attending a school like Eton College and having a visitor once a week. 40% had 0. In fact, we sent the clipping from the paper. They had an annual survey of the state of Jewish youth from the Board of Deputies. And it said so many percent in the Zionist Federation schools, so many percent in the Jewish secondary school movement, so many percent in Chabad, etc., etc., so many percent going once a week to Sunday classes, and 42% no education. And we sent the clipping to the Rebbe because anything that mentioned Chabad in the papers was sent to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe's reply was not about Chabad. He said, what plans do you propose to help the 42% who are getting no education? That's what he wanted to know.
So what percentage of Jewish children today get Jewish education in England?
Vast majority. The vast majority are in Jewish schools, not just saying having Jewish education. Virtually all Jewish children who are identified as Jewish have some sort of education, and the majority are attending Jewish day schools today. It was something which was unheard of at that time.
So when you came to London in 1965 and you guys began to work on this idea of Jewish education and changing the format of Jewish life in England, what was the resistance that you encountered?
The Lubavitch was working in Lubavitch Foundation a few years before I actually came out there. There was, the main resistance was that there seemed to be a foreign implant coming here. It seemed to be something that there was a certain equilibrium amongst the Jewish people. There's the right of the spectrum, there's the left, and everyone minds their own business and respects each other. And the Rebbe taught us that this is not the correct way. The Rebbe told us to always maintain correct relations with the establishment, and we worked with them together and try our best, but there was resistance. There was always resistance to anything which is trying to break the mold that's there at the moment. And the idea was, if you knew what was right, the idea of going out with a mitzvah tank in the middle of the street, or having a public menorah in the middle of, outside the Hilton in Park Lane, this was unheard of, undreamt of.
Now, when Rabbi Kaminetzki came to Dnepropetrovsk, which we have to understand just to be put into a context. For 30 years, the Dnepr was a closed city. It was a center of the armaments industry. They built arms in the Ukraine. When you arrived the first Friday night in Dnepr, you got a different kind of welcome than when I think Rabbi Lou came to. Dnepr is the second largest city in the Ukraine than Rabbi Lou got when he came to England.
Two bochim that were sent before me, Rabbi Sorol Spalter and Tasriel Shem Tov, who everybody knows, they were able to prepare Dnepr, and when we came, we had a big reception Friday night with 500 people that were happy to see us. But otherwise, when we walked in the street, Jewish people were running away from us. They were scared. And when I needed a translator to translate, somebody told me that somebody who knows well English and Russian, his name is Sasha Zamansky. So I looked for him, I came to his house, and I knocked on the door. When he saw me, he became pale and he almost fainted. So I asked him what happened. He says, "Are you a Chosid? Are you from the Chassidim?" I said, "Yes." "Are you sent by the Lubavitcher Rebbe?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Please go leave my house. I don't want to have anything to do with you." But then we started speaking and talking. So he said that before I came, the KGB people invited him. He was a Hebrew teacher in the city and considered a Zionist activist, doing Zionism, which was not allowed because it was still the Soviet Union, and especially in Dnepropetrovsk, everything was very seriously controlled and watched because of the army industry. They were looking for spions.
Spies.
Yeah. So he said, before you came, they invited me in, and they said, we are ready to close our eyes on what you do with the Hebrew, with the Zionist stuff, but soon there will be a person that is going to be sent by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's a Chosid, and he's a Shaliach. Don't have anything to do with him. So he asked them why. So they told them, because these people are very, very, very dangerous people. So he asked why. So they said, because they are not afraid of anything. So stay away from them. This was my welcome.
This is your welcome to Dnepr. I was in Dnepr a few weeks ago, and he built the phenomenal Menorah Center, which is a 22-story Jewish community center. But what I really found out about the Jewish community is that suddenly I got a kidney stone. I had 3 doctors, 14 nurses, every piece of equipment in the world. The medical care in Dnepr is better than the medical care in Kaiser Permanente in California.
The Jewish medical care.
The Jewish medical care. But when Rabbi Butman arrived in Phnom Penh, this was a different kind of encounter. Why don't you tell us about your first Pesach, your first Passover, before you came to Phnom Penh, when you came to do the first Seder?
We were greeted by 2 roving rabbis who were there before us. My close shliach, my brother, I can say, Rabbi Hartman from Vietnam, who's in a sense, we follow his footsteps because he moved just 3 years before us, and it's a very similar situation. He told Rabbi Cantor, who was taking care of our trip, he says, if you want Rabbi Butman to move there, you send 2 Bachrim ahead, and you make sure that if anything needs to be bought out of the hotel, don't let the Butmans go out. And so when we came to Pesach for the first time, we were at a 5-star hotel, and aside from beautiful rooms with air conditioners and much service, we haven't seen much. It was only after the first night of Seder that my wife insisted that perhaps we should go out to see how life is out of the hotel.
So tell us about what happened at that first Passover.
We came very unfamiliar with what is going to happen. We had a million questions of the place. In fact, we were planning to make that Pesach at my in-laws' home. My brother-in-law had a bar mitzvah just a few days before Pesach. And it was only 2 weeks before Pesach when Rabbi Cantor called and asked if we want to go there. And when I had a million questions, he said, look, if you go there for Pesach, you'll have more answers than I can ever provide you with. And it wasn't easy to make such a decision to give up the Pesach, to give up the bar mitzvah, but we decided that it's a good chance. We had a database from previous Rabbi Bachrim who visited before, some emails, some phone numbers. The owner of the main paper in Cambodia is how not a Jewish man from Japan, and so we had also free advertisement. And to our surprise, we had about 70 Jews that showed up to the first Seder. When it was about time to take out Afikoman and they couldn't find it, I said to the people, I mean, there weren't many children there. Who would have taken it? And a group of Jews stood up and said, we took it. I said, okay, so if you give it back, we can continue the Seder. They say, what do you mean we need a prize for this? I'm like, well, okay, what do you want? They said, we want Chabad to promise us that you're opening a permanent center in Phnom Penh.
I guess Wyoming, Rabbi Mendelsohn is in Wyoming since 2007, correct? And what did your wife tell you when you told her that you'd like to go to Wyoming? And tell us about your first visits to Wyoming. I mean, how many Jews are in Wyoming?
There's about 1,500 Jews that live throughout the state, but the state is massive. It is very large, and so they're very spread out. They're all over the place. And for about 70 years, Chabad has been sending Bachrim, students, to visit Jewish people all across the state of Wyoming. I spoke recently with, a while back, maybe a couple of years ago, with Rabbi Bentzion Klein, who visited in Wyoming in 1957. And so Bachrim have been visiting over there and meeting up with Jewish people over there. And I did this all over the world in many different countries, and I spent 3 summers doing this in Wyoming. And when I was dating my wife, it was fairly certain that that would be a very strong possibility that we would end up moving over there, because we had made so many relationships and became so close with a lot of the people over there, and they were really pushing to have a full-time presence in Wyoming. So I took her there shortly after we got married on a pilot trip. And it's a really small town. 8,000 people that live in Jackson. And
so
Jackson
you don't live in Laramie, you live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Jackson Hole. And so it's a really small town. So I started driving her around in circles to make it look as if there was more things going on, because this is where we would be for the rest of our lives. So went around and around and around, and finally she looks at me and she says, weren't we just here? So it was a really difficult challenge right in the early stages when we were visiting, but then we did Shabbos, like Rabbi Butman did, in a 5-star home. There's a lot of very wealthy individuals that live in Jackson Hole, and we had a very good friend till today, a very close friend of ours, who has a beautiful home. And she invited us to do Shabbos with her, and to invite all of the people that we knew in Jackson Hole to visit as well, to join us for Shabbos. And during dinner, one person got up and said, I pledge, if Rabbi and your wife move here, I'm going to donate this amount of money. And who else is on board? And another person got up and said that they would like to donate. And when my wife saw this, she said, okay, we're in. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. But then, obviously, you can't just move to a place just because the people over there like you. We had a conversation with Chabad World Headquarters with Rabbi Kotlarski, and we made a proposal. We explained exactly what we had going on over there. And he said, we want you to move to Cheyenne, Wyoming. That would be a better place. It's a larger city. I said, find somebody else for Cheyenne. You know, it's not, I visited there many, many, many times. I know the community over there. I know the people over there. There's a synagogue over there that's over 100 years old, but it's just not a place that would be ready currently. So he said, okay, Jackson Hole it is.
I want to just change the tone for one moment and talk about something a little bit more historical and deeper. One of the veteran shluchim, Rabbi Kunin, many of you have heard him. He was one of the pioneering shluchim to California, and really, in a sense, broke the ice of the American Jewish community, told me that when he was about to leave Brooklyn, which is about probably a little around the same time you did, one of the older Chassidim came over to him and said, Kunin, you're only going to California because you can't find a job. You're going to be back here in 6 weeks. It seems, we're talking about now, Rabbi Kaminetzki has a 22-story. You got to go up. You got to see that conference room on the 20th. What floor is it? The 19th floor? 18th floor. I'm telling you, lunch with him on the 18th floor. You think you're in a fancy high-rise in Manhattan. And you travel from these different cities and communities. What's been accomplished is really remarkable. But in 1960 and in 1955 and in 1965, the idea of going to Jewish communities and changing things was a revolutionary thought. And as much as the Rebbe fought a battle externally, he fought a battle internally. And Rabbi Lou, you lived through this. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that internal conflict, so to speak, about am I just going to California because I can't get a job doing anything else? What was going on internally within Chabad?
It's hard to imagine today, even going to Cambodia or Wyoming, which in its own way is even more remote, to the idea of going away at that time. The financial challenges that existed, the human resource challenges, but mainly the mentality, the idea that a person would go overseas. A 3-minute phone call through an operator would cost you about 1 or 2 days' wages to be able to make. It was you went and you were cut off from family and friends, and the Rebbe had that global vision right then, before globalism was popular. If you look at the Rebbe's letters and the Rebbe's Shlichus, the Rebbe was practically begging and was convincing people that is the way forward, and that there are people, we're not fighting a defensive war anymore, where people would go into an enclave and try to protect themselves from the outside irreligious world. The Rebbe said there is no irreligious world. There's a world of people whose souls are just waiting, like people who have parched throats in a desert, and go there and they will take to it. But not everybody understood that. Certainly the older generation, people they were cynical, they were doubting, and it was the young people who understood. The Rebbe said that must be the reality, and people went.
So your peers, some of them did become shluchim, some of them didn't become shluchim. Your peers were the ones that your peers were really the group that were the first pioneers. They had the guts to come late, even to go to Phnom Penh or Wyoming is a challenging thing to do, but people have gone to 1,000 other communities a little bit easier. When you began to leave, few people had gone anywhere.
It was unheard of. It was unheard of for a person who was settled in a nice little community. You had your family, you had your extended family, and to go away and to be isolated from where you were brought up, even if you were in the middle of a Jewish metropolis like London, it was something that people just couldn't understand. Why someone would go away from New York, from Crown Heights, and you can get a teaching job. You could get work or whatever it was. And you're right that it was exceptional.
Rabbi Kaminetzki, when you went to the Dnepr, to the Ukraine in 1990, when communism is falling, what was your sense? Did you have a sense of fear? Were you worried? What drove you to be willing to go to such a remote place, in many ways a primitive place, to go there and to begin a shlichus?
Rebbe grew up in Dnepropetrovsk, and the day of the yortzeit of his mother, Rebbe Tzimchane, and the yortzeit of his father, the Rebbe always spoke about Dnepropetrovsk, Yekaterinoslav, the way it was before. So for me, it was going to the Rebbe city. And the sense that we had was that it was not like going to Lubavitch, as in Lubavitch's name, to be a regular Chabad Shliach, but really having the privilege to be connected personally to the Rebbe, because the Rebbe spoke so much about this city. So when we came to Dnepropetrovsk, we wanted to meet the people that still remember the Rebbe and the Rebbe's parents, and to find all the addresses and the homes and the cheder where the Rebbe learned, and to collect some stories and documents. So this was our motive, to come to the Rebbe city. And in the beginning, the Rebbe made us really feel, how important it was that we came, and we got big blessings and big attention. Just one little example. Before the first winter, my wife was back in New York for some medical reason, and she was standing next to the mikveh. And the Rebbe saw my wife, and he asked Rabbi Yomin Klein, who took the Rebbe to the mikveh, if my wife knows that in Dnepropetrovsk you have to make sure to collect enough potatoes for the winter, because you cannot purchase them in the winter. to such details. And we got many broches and even special attention. So this was our motive.
I want to add something. When I was in Dnepr a few weeks ago, I met with an owner of a chocolate factory, one of the largest chocolate factories in the Ukraine. It's state-of-the-art. You would think you're in a chocolate factory in America. So I said to him, why is there such a remarkable success in this community? This is not a religious Jew. And he says, it's very simple. He says to me, das ist the Rebbe Stadt. This is the Rebbe's city. There's a miraculous sense here. I want to return to Cambodia because I think for all of us, it is the most remote of all places, and in many ways probably one of the most intriguing of all places. And I'm sure it's not an easy place to live. There's no kosher pizza that can be delivered down the block. There's no kosher Domino's. Tell us a little bit of your early challenges. I'm sure it wasn't easy. And how you tell us a little bit about those. What was uniquely challenging about Cambodia, and how did you overcome it?
The truth, maybe it's a bit too early about talking about overcoming it. It's in a sense more challenging now than it was in the beginning, because we came very young and enthusiastic. It takes time to realize the lack of family and friends. You're excited about Skype and other things. And by the time reality hit us, we are already with community, with activities, with upcoming events. And when the question arose whether I will be able to actually continue, the answer was there, able or not, I don't know, but it's for sure needed. So when challenges came and we knew that we're needed, it's easier to fight them, so-called. I think the main challenge that we're facing is the lack of social environment for our children. Thanks to the online school, our children I'm not concerned about their skills of studying, although I did not have much trust in this school in the first place. It was, I received a call from one of the shluchim in Asia saying they're trying to put together a pre-1A online. I said, we didn't listen to our teachers live. My 4-year-old child will sit by the screen for an hour every day. But they insisted, he told me they need minimum of 6 students, and they're not sure they'll have, so I asked, how much is it? And they said, it's $90 a month. And I thought to myself, well, I can donate $90 a month for the efforts of the Asia Shluchim to have a class. And I said, okay. Our Zalman is actually glued to the screen from the moment it begins to the moment it ends. It is unbelievable how this school really tremendously helps in that matter. But as knowledgeable as you may be, thanks to this school, it doesn't replace the joy of going outside and playing with the children after school. He had the pleasure of meeting one of his classmates after a full year of school.
How old is Zalman?
Zalman is turning 6 soon. So he started school at 4 and a half, and he's now close to 6. So about 5 months ago, for the summer, we came in for the first time as a family. And the Goldschmidt family from Koh Samui, Thailand, happened to be in town also for a family occasion. And so there were 2 little 5-year-old children standing there after knowing each other from the screen for so long. And they were talking and talking like without an end. And it was really impossible. After an hour and a half, they were talking, they were playing. They didn't want to say goodbye to each other. But again, it's a little drop that we get.
So Rabbi Mendelsohn, you have the same similar problem. Because I don't think there's too many Jewish children in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
There are Jewish children in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, but unfortunately there aren't any children that come from a similar background as I do. So we have...
There's not a whole group of Chabad people with hats and beards and yarmulkes in Jackson Hole.
They even have the big streimels, those fur hats, they're walking around down.
Yeah, they catch them in the mountains behind Jackson Hole.
But we have a camp, we have Hebrew school, we study with kids one-on-one, but it's not the type of Jewish education that I would want for my children to have.
The challenge, I think, for Shluchim internally is something which is very different where you two are, which is more isolated communities, than the challenges that you two are finding in more developed communities. In the Dnieper there's a Jewish school run by Chabad for the broader community, and there's a yeshiva for boys and a yeshiva for girls. How did you move this community where there was no Judaism for so many years to a point that today there is, how many children are getting daily Jewish education in Dnieper?
Over 1,000. That's very easy with Ukrainian Jews. They're very warm, Ukrainian Jews, you cannot go wrong. All you have to do is come and smile to them, give them a bissel l'chaim, and everything is good. No speech today of any rabbi in the world doesn't start or finish with Sipurei Hasidim. How do you say in English?
Hasidic stories.
It all happened in Ukraine. The Ukrainian Jews are unbelievable. All they have to see is a united community, happy people, and l'chaim.
And it works.
Yeah, and Baruch Hashem, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, but I think you're underplaying a little bit what was achieved here. To come see 1,000 children in different schools, preschools, older kids, high schools, whatever, to change those families. We all know how difficult Jewish education is here in America. That to get those kids to come to those schools must have been a little bit more than just saying l'chaim and smiling at them.
Any shliach in Ukraine, as long as he has enough money to build a building, open up a class, and hire teachers, he will be full. It's all about getting enough money to do what you have to do. The problem in Ukraine is that some cities have Jews but have no local support. I'm lucky that my city, the Rebbe blessed my city, and it's a very wealthy community that is supporting itself. The only city in the world where you have, in a radius of 2 kilometers, 10 shopping centers owned by Jews is in Dniepropetrovsk. There is a saying in Russian, "U každого Abrama svoja programa." I don't know how to translate.
I can't tell you that in English.
Every Abraham has its program. It comes out in Russian well.
Yeah.
It's...
So
let's...
Rabbi Lou, the English world is known as staid and proper and prim and all that kind of stuff. And there's certain challenges within Judaism today in England. What is Chabad's role in the English Jewish community?
I want you to know that we provide leadership. There are over 30 communities which are not Chabad communities in England, which have Chabad rabbis, including the one who's going to be the next speaker today, who are universally respected for their scholarship and for their leadership qualities. We're very proud that we have the strongest presence on the campuses. Thanks to people like Mr. David Slager, we have 14 Chabad houses, including some of them are residential houses for students. I personally have four of my children are actually in England. None of them in the center where I am, in that same neighborhood. But I have a son who's in Bloomsbury, that's West London, Baker Street, that area. And every Friday night, he and his wife prepare a meal for 100 young people, almost all of them under the age of 30. It's very international. This is the 21st century, very cosmopolitan, a lot of French, a lot of Americans, a lot of Ukrainians that come there every Friday night. And once a month he has a bigger one in the Western Marble Arch Synagogue when about 150 people come. We have like this, and they have made shidduchim. People have been introduced to each other from other countries over there, and he has prevented various relationships and liaisons which would have been tragedies for the Jewish people. And that's just one that I know closest because he's my son. But we have 14 Chabad on campus. We have schools.
You're basically saying,
we have close to 1,000 children between pre-1A and yeshiva level in the country of England, probably over 1,000, including 2.
How many Jews are there in England today?
There are about 300,000, the whole England.
1,000 or 300,000 is still not the largest percentage.
It would be equivalent to having in New York 300 young Israel rabbis who would be Lubavitchers.
Because you're playing the role in the regular Orthodox synagogues. Many of the Chabad rabbis are playing the role.
There are Chabad rabbis, and it's not just the Chabad rabbis. The Chabad educational system has created teachers. We have many of the shluchim who are here from different parts of the world. I see right away our Yedidenu Rabbi from Panama, who's married to one of our we have ex-pupils. We are providing leadership, and I'm a headmaster of a school as the central job which the Rebbe gave me in 1975. After 10 years working almost exclusively with students and young, the Rebbe told me, become a principal of a school. Now I'm the head of education, but I still have a focus and a weekly assembly with the girls, and I teach the highest classes. And I tell them, you are all going to be shluchas. Some of you are going to go to different countries, or maybe even here in England. Many of you will not. You'll be housewives. But every one of the children who is educated in the Chabad system is taught that we are responsible for everyone. We are family. We have a global view. Your Shabbos table is not just for yourself. I remember our oldest daughter, who's today in California, married to Shimon Posner. She was a teenager, and I go into her room at her house, and she had created a poster on her wall. One from Yid plus one non-from Yid equals 2 Yidden. That was the poster. And it was something which was revolutionary then, 25 years ago. It meant that every one of us needs everyone else. No one is expendable. And I try to instill that, and we all do in our school system, so that there's an exponential growth which one can see coming out of the school system.
So I want to move here just another a little bit different level of this. Rabbi Butman, you've also received a certain degree of recognition from the governmental level and some kind of encounters, which I don't know the details, to be honest, with the king of, I don't even know there was a king in Cambodia until recently. With the king of Cambodia. Maybe you could share with us a little bit how the broader society has reacted to a rabbi in its presence.
The broader society is actually looking at anything Western as something unique and special. If you're Western, you can walk in the street in any way or shape you want, and you're well respected, which is part of the reason why all kinds of Western people come to Cambodia. Soon after we arrived, I discussed with one of the Jewish lawyers in town. Actually, out of 120 Jews, we have about 4 of them that are lawyers. One of them is a Kohen from Chicago, and I spoke to him. And I said, I want that our center should be recognized by the government. And he says, don't worry, Cambodia does not give any hard time to business visa people. No one will ask you what you do, you're safe. I said, I know, but I want this place to be recognized. So he says, okay, we can work out a business visa for you. A business permit for you. You'll open a business, you'll say you're a kosher restaurant or something like that. I said, no, I want to be recognized like a Jewish institute. He looked at me and says, I cannot help you with that. And it was important for me, so I went myself. The ministry is called the Ministry of Cult and Religion. And I went over to say that we want recognition from them for our activities. What is your religion, they asked? I said, we're Jewish. So the man puts his glasses on and he says, look, Christians are around for 2,000 years. Muslims are around for about 1,400 years. But you guys are new.
What was that last one? The rest of us.
You guys are new.
What's your book? He says to me. I says, well, the Bible that you have on your shelf from the Christians, this is actually our book. He says, I want you to translate your basic books to Cambodian. Are you going to read this? And then a week later, I called up and they asked for another paper, and another paper, and another paper, and the process got very long. There's all kinds of means through which you're supposed to get the process closer. But it wasn't coming. Then at some point, the king became aware of our existence. So first we had one meeting, and then just a week later I got a phone call from the Ministry of Cult and Religion that my certificate is ready. So two and a half, you know the joke about the man who was explaining how he became rich. After the Holocaust, he came to New York, and he bought a box of 100 pence for $1, and he sold each pen for 5 cents. And after he sold one box, he bought 3 other boxes, and he paid 2 friends to be standing in the subway station of other 2 places. By then he already had 300 pens and 600 pens, and then he had 6 people working for him, and then he got a phone call from Europe saying his uncle died and left him $6 million. That's how he became a millionaire. So this is basically how we got this certificate. You know, we working with this paper and that paper, and they asked for my criminal records. I got my criminal records from Israel. They said, your registration is on the U.S. passport that I have, which I only lived here for 5 years. It was my natural reaction to go to the Israeli records. They asked for the Americans one. I got the American ones. They said they want the local one as well. And then they wanted a picture of me and picture of this and picture of that, and it was just going nowhere. And then suddenly I got that phone call, and we received the certificate.
Also, you met the king. Rabbi Kaminetzki, things have changed a little bit in Dnepropetrovsk. There's no KGB chasing you anymore. Maybe you could share with us, how is the government now relating to Jews? What does it do to help you? And what is the relationship of what kind of Jewish community is there today? How many Jews live there?
Officially, it's 500,000 Jews, but we know that it's over 1 million. Every day we meet new people who are coming out of the closet.
In one city?
No, in Ukraine.
In Ukraine?
In my city, there are 50,000 Jews. The government are going out of their way to show support. In all the international votes in the UN, in Europe, they vote for Israel, and they make sure the Jewish community knows about it, because they want to make sure Jews don't go to Israel. And Mr. Yanukovych, the president of Ukraine, is being blamed for not being democratic, for putting the previous prime minister in jail, because he wants to stay in power and make money. But to Jews, he's very good, because he's making money with them.
Especially in Dnepropetrovsk.
Yeah.
Now, Rabbi Mendelsohn,
it's very good, really going out of their way to...
So there's no sense of fear or anxiety or anything like that
Not
for
at
Jews
all.
who live there today?
Not at all. You can go to Yamelke in the center of the street. Western Ukraine has no Jews. You know, the Lvov has history, a bad history, and no Jews left, hardly Jewish people left. Eastern Ukraine, Central Ukraine, our part is very Jewish populated, and Jews are very safe.
I want to go to Rabbi Mendelsohn for a question, and I want to come back to Rabbi Lou. We're going to close this up very soon. Rabbi Mendelsohn, you have a very unique situation in Jackson, because as you land in the airport in Jackson, you'll see on the tarmac of the Jackson airport, there's Learjets. There's none in Dnieper yet. I don't think there's a park of 50 Learjets as you land in Dnieper. And it seems that the elite of the American society comes there, and that puts you, so to speak, in contact with a demographic which may be rarely to walk into a shul. And maybe you could share with us a little bit about those interactions with some of those people who stand at the leadership of government or business or politics, who may come to Jackson because of its unique status as a place for those people to come to.
I recently found out that I bring my cleaners to the same, my cleaners for my clothes to the same place that Dick Cheney does. I went in to pick up my cleaners, and there he is. He's standing there. There's a whole lot of very interesting people that both live in Jackson Hole and that pass through Jackson Hole. There are about 500 local Jewish people in Jackson Hole. Some people that you may have heard of. There's a fellow by the name of Jim Wolfenson, who's a past president of the World Bank, very highly influential. There are many other very highly influential people that either live or visit Jackson Hole with less famous names. They tend to not be celebrities. Those types of people usually hang out more in places like Aspen or Vail. It's a different type of place. It's very rugged and raw by us versus glitzy and glamorous. It's very natural. In addition to that, we also have a lot of visitors that pass through. So there's a local community of 500. There's another essentially 500 Jewish people who own homes by us but don't really live by us. And then there's about 40,000 Jewish people that travel through Jackson Hole every year. And we've encountered some of the most interesting people during the last 6 years since we've been there. We've had Robert Kraft from the New England Patriots join us for a Shabbos dinner. All kinds of interesting people, just very unique people. And so
they all find their refuge in Chabad. It's when they travel. I have a guy in Israel, he lives down the block from me. He doesn't come to shul, but he tells me every time he goes to China, he goes to Chabad where he goes to visit. Rabbi Lou, when we spoke last week, you told me you were to share with us something which was novel and unique that you've never spoken before. Some kind of unique, special story. I have no idea what it is. About the early days of Shlichus. So maybe I'd like to, as we close up here, this little session, I'd like to ask you to share with us something about the beginnings of your Shlichus in England, or maybe even before that. Something that you can share with us from those early days that may be inspirational to all of us.
I'll tell you a story, which I didn't expect to tell. Rabbi Sudek, Rabbi Nachman ben Chaya Basya, our Shliach, who unfortunately had a medical problem at the moment, is in ICU, which was already a promotion to the ICU. And he was honored by the Queen, by Her Majesty, with OBE, which is a Order of the British Empire, in recognition of the work that Chabad has done in England. And I go back about 40 years before that, when one of our young teachers was visiting New York, and she was in by the Rebbe for a private audience, a Yechidus. And the Rebbe said, did you visit any schools, any Jewish schools while you're here? You're teaching in the Chabad school in England. And she said, yes. And the Rebbe said, what was the difference that you noticed? So she said that the children here are much more familiar. I think she used a stronger word. She said in England, they're better disciplined. So the Rebbe said the reason for that is because there's a royal family. A malucha. He said there's a royalty, and the country, it reflects itself in the organization of the Jewish community as well, by the way. The whole organization, and therefore there's a greater propensity for better disciplined children than over here. Now what hit me, because I know people whom the Rebbe told, you're in France, you have a tremendous advantage, because there it's a revolutionary society, and people can do tshuva, and they can be revolutionary. And in American people, he told, the Americans are independent. And therefore, children will take initiative. Therefore, he saw the positive side of that lack of structure. And when people were from Israel, he said, he told someone in England, he said, in Israel, when they're 7 years old, you can't tell them what to do anymore. He says, they got the chutzpah. And so, as an educationist, I understood that what the Rebbe was telling us, in Kabbalah it explained there's or and there's keli, there's light and there's vessel. There's the message, there's the idea you want to communicate, or the emotion that you want to express, which could be very intense, but then there's the language, there's the vessels, there's the words you have to use in order to share it with someone. You can be overwhelming with a person, and if the light is too strong, you're not getting the message across. But if you take too much notice of the person, then you might dilute your message. Our job is a constant tightrope walk, and it was like that in the 60s, and it's like that in the 2010s. At any stage, what the Rebbe taught us, you have your goal. Your goal is to teach Jews. Your goal is to elevate Jews. Your goal is to bring people to personal redemption and bring the whole world to its redemption. And you have to go and work it in a way that it will be speaking to the people in that particular situation. And I see that as the hallmark of the Rebbe's leadership. And as an educationist, I always try to communicate this to the teachers. We have to see what situation I'm in. And you can bellyache about it and say, I got this problem, that problem. The Rebbe said, this is your situation. Use it. Take it aboard and something good will come out of it.
Rabbi Lou, I want to thank our 4 outstanding panelists who in 4 countries, in 4 countries, in 4 different situations, Rabbi Lou in proper and prim England, Rabbi Kaminetzki in the warm and welcoming Ukraine, Rabbi Mendelsohn in the spiritually uplifting in the mountains of Wyoming, and Rabbi Butman in Phnom Penh, who is now working on building a mikveh. Hopefully will be the first soon mikveh in Cambodia. Each one of them heroes in their own communities, working for the welfare of the Jewish people, and the Shlichus in their merit. We should be zeicha to all march together with all the shluchim together to Yerushalayim. Thank you very much.